What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to For the Millie. I am your host, Alex Blickel, joined by the great TwoGun. Lots of success here in week one of the NFL season. We had 2 subscribers hit for over $100,000 on DraftKings using the brand new GPP scores. And then TwoGun, you followed it up with a 50K performance of your own in Pick 6, which we will talk a lot about. So I couldn't be much more excited for week 2. I don't know if you're feeling the same way.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about week 2. It's funny because I did okay at Pick 6 in week 1, but I just got slaughtered at DFS. Like I lost money. To be clear, I got annihilated in week 1. Like, yes, I had one good Pick 6 hit, and I really want to talk about. It's funny because I got the minimum on this 5 and 5, like the payout minimum. So I'll talk a little bit about what happened there, and it's about the Debo line is basically what happened. But yeah, so it's funny how maybe I'll do a little bit more Pick 6 this year. I think I'll lose. I'm sure I'll do the same amount of DFS, but yeah, I'll definitely take better luck at DFS. Let's just leave it at that.
I mean, that's the nature of DFS, right? And it's also the nature of how you and I both approach DFS, where we're trying to have that one huge hit throughout the season. And if we get that one huge hit, it doesn't matter if we lose all of our money in the rest of the week. So we're definitely good there. We've got subscribers in the YouTube chat already, so shout out to you guys, and anybody else who wants to drop in as the show goes on, please do so. You can drop questions about Showdown tonight, about Pick 6, basically anything that you want to talk about, we are here to discuss with you all. So we're going to start once again with some Showdown discussion. TwoGun, I don't know how you feel about this slate, but when I look at this slate, I see, number one, in our projections, both like our actual projections of what we expect in the game on the FTN data side and what the field is going to do, pretty heavily on the Miami side of things. And my initial thought is I kind of just want to stack Buffalo and go from there.
It's funny because my initial read is to just stack Buffalo. Like, I just kind of think they're the better team.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm often do the sports betting contests a lot. I have that article that comes out. I didn't bother I'm not including this game in there, but I kind of like, Buffalo +3 just as a straight bet. With Achane, I mean, Mostert out, Achane kind of not 100%. And the Dolphins they kind of got lucky against the Jags, whereas I feel like the Bills just started off bad, but kind of controlled that game. And we should use one game as an example, but I just think this Bills team is pretty good. I don't see the reason to stack I feel like it's a pick'em type situation. Yeah. So if the ownership really is heavily on Miami, that's a very clear go to Buffalo to me. The one thing I'll say though is Josh Allen's a little bit of a pick machine, so it makes having like a Dolphins defense kind of fun. But other than that, I think I kind of like Buffalo in general. Obviously, I love James Cook still. He just didn't get a touchdown last game, but he's gonna get those touches. I just can't get off the guy.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because I'm with you in the sense that I think Buffalo's the better team, but our numbers, like our DVOA numbers, our betting model, all of that actually says, Miami's the better team. So I do feel a little bit awkward going against that because I do have so much trust in those models, but my just personal prior coming into the season is that Buffalo's a better team, and I saw nothing in week 1 to kind of dispel that. And I think part of the reason why I like Buffalo in this one is because I do think that we have seen a very different Miami team over the last couple of years, depending on the type of competition they're playing. They have absolutely dominated worse competition, and they have struggled against better competition, particularly when they play better defenses that are able to pressure the quarterback without sending a lot of blitzes like Buffalo can. So I think that's the angle that makes me feel okay with going against the model, because that sort of difference between how a team performs against good competition versus bad competition is extremely difficult to model in. So I feel, again, pretty good about just going to the Buffalo side in Showdown.
Well, it's often you also have to remember, like, our stats guys are not DFS guys. Like, they're thinking, like, what is a better team? But doesn't make it a better DFS play because if everyone is really heavy on Tyreek and they're just kind of abandoning they want Tyreek, they want Tua, they probably want Achane at this point. Well, then I guess they'll throw in Josh Allen. That leaves them nothing, no salary for anything else. So all these Buffalo skill players, Dalton Kincaid, maybe James Cook, they're just going to get abandoned, and no one can play the Bills' defense. And even though talk about how Josh Allen's a turnover machine, Bills' defense is actually pretty good. Like they just put up a lot of points somehow, and Tua can turn it over as well. So it makes, from an ownership standpoint, make more sense to stack the Bills, even if the Dolphins are the better team.
And that also brings up a good point, because even if you think, Miami is going to do better, Buffalo skill guys can still produce more. Although in this game, I almost think it's the other way around. Like the Bills have so many guys that the ball can be spread out to. You could see Shakir, Coleman, Kincaid, Samuel all having a handful of receptions, but none of them having a huge game. Whereas the Miami offense is very much more concentrated in Waddle and Hill, and then, of course, the running backs as well. Although that's the big question mark that still we need an answer to on this slate is which of the Miami running backs are actually healthy. What kind of role can we assume for Achane? There were a couple games last year where Achane was questionable, was active and played, and barely had any role. So just because he's ruled in doesn't mean that we can be 100% confident that he's going to have that RB1 type role that we saw a week ago. So lots of uncertainty there. Do you have a lean on any of the Miami backs as of now?
I think I'm going to have Jeff Wilson every single one. I don't see how I'm not. At 2,600, why not? Like, at the very least, he's the candidate for the Mostert role. I don't see any way Achane gets more snaps than he normally does because he's not 100%. Yeah. And you don't, take a guy that's not 100% and suddenly increase his role. Yes, Achane's going to get he might have 35 to 40% of snaps. And then, Jeff Wilson has 40 to 50 and Jalen Wright has 10%. And with that number, it's it doesn't mean you don't play Achane. You can still play him in a lineup or two, but you definitely have Jeff Wilson in every single lineup.
Yeah, there's also an element of, even if Achane does go, it's an ankle injury for somebody who is the dynamic player he is because of his speed and his agility, his burst. So if the ankle injury takes that away, not only is he then less effective, but then it's also okay, why does Miami even want him to be on the field if he's now at more of an injury risk? And because you've taken his great skill, his great power away from him, he's not even more effective than Jeff Wilson or Wright. So I think one big question that a lot of people are going to have is what makes you so confident in Wilson over Jalen Wright, assuming that Jalen Wright is healthy or is active today. For one thing, I will say I agree with you that I think it's Wilson, and I think that it's more of a trust factor from the Miami coaching staff, from McDaniel, just knowing that Wilson can do the job that he's being asked to do. But I'm curious if you have any other thoughts there.
No, not really. I don't really have any other thoughts. It's more just along the lines that Jalen Wright was inactive. Jeff Wilson was active. Jeff Wilson's been with the team for a while. We haven't seen anything or heard anything about Jalen Wright. My understanding is that Jalen Wright is is he more of a scat back? Not so much of a power back? I'm not that good of a football guy and knowing stuff, but what is his,
He has the same type of speed that Mostert and Achane have. Maybe not quite to that degree, but certainly he has more of that level of burst than Jeff Wilson. And so I think you're probably right in the sense that, let's say that Achane is a surprise scratch tonight, then I think the most likely answer is that Jeff Wilson has Mostert's role from a year ago and Wright has Achane's role from a year ago. Maybe not exactly, but I think that would be a pretty good characterization of what those two are like. And so assuming that Achane is in and is just limited a little bit, then I think it's probably a pretty even mix between Achane and Wilson, where Wilson is probably the more likely guy to be in the goal line role, but they gave a lot of those carries to Achane a week ago, so maybe not. But yeah,
I think Achane's definitely, he definitely might get goal line work. I mean, I think what's going to happen is Achane's active, and he's playing 50% snaps, and then Jeff Wilson's playing 30 to 40 to 50% snaps, and Jalen Wright plays like a little bit. That, to me, is that the simplest guess of what's going to happen based on what we've seen and what makes sense? That's, to me, is the simplest answer. So I'm going with that. I don't even mind people playing Jalen Wright at 2K. It's just how is Jeff Wilson not going to pay off at 2,600? Mm-hmm. Even if he gets 50 yards and like a catch for 5 yards, that's 6.5 points. That's still okay. It might not be optimal, but it probably is going to fit in there one way or another. It's kind of, I don't expect him to put up Jordan Mason numbers, but he could, by the way. I still don't see how I'm off. If you spent 5K, yeah, I can see definitely like, I don't know. At 2,600, especially since you can use that salary with, the Tyreek Hills and the James Cooks and the Josh Allens of the world. I just don't see how you go wrong using them.
Yeah, I think for comparison's sake, Ty Johnson had the third down role in week 1 for Buffalo, but he did very little with it. Ray Davis also was mixed in. He had 3 carries, 1 nice reception. My personal thought is that Ray Davis's role is going to grow throughout the season, but I don't think he's completely taking that third down role from Ty Johnson just yet, particularly not on a really short week like this. So, the Wilson role tonight should be so much better than either of those guys have. You have some other guys down here, like Dawson Knox certainly has touchdown equity, and so maybe he would be a decent pivot. Maybe Jonnu Smith would be a decent pivot. Or I think the other way, if you do want to fade Jeff Wilson, is to say, okay, what if nobody way down there is necessary? And,
I don't think,
bottom out my lineup.
I'd love to want to fade him. I think people are just being like, I don't want to use him because he just doesn't fit in my lineup. Like, I just don't think he's like, I don't think Jeff Wilson isn't going to be 95%. Even like Jordan Mason wasn't. I just feel like Jeff Wilson should be 80, 90% plus rostered, and he won't be. So to me, it's very simple. Roster Jeff Wilson and use your salaries somewhere else. And the funny thing is, like, often in these like 2-point games, I talk about wanting to do the 5-1 stack. It doesn't work as well when you have a Jeff Wilson because you have all that extra salary. You don't need to save it for defense and kickers and stuff like that. You still can, but it's just not. I just don't see how you get off the guy. I just don't.
We have Wilson at 46% in MME contests for his flex ownership. How high do you think it can get in single entries and larger stakes?
Well, what is about his captain?
Only 4% in MME, which I think follows.
At Jeff Wilson at 50%, that tells me like I just need to fucking max ownership tonight. Like I should put more money in.
Well, so my thought is that I think he could get to 65, 70-ish in
I don't think he's going to get those 70. I think you guys' ownership is really good. And like I don't think I would take under 50% on Jeff Wilson, but I'm not taking over 60. Like I think he'd probably be in the 50s, maybe low 60s. He's not going to get above 70. Even I thought Jordan Mason was going to be 100%, okay? And I thought he was going to be at least 9. He was closer to 80%.
Yeah.
I was shocked. And by the way, we would have killed it if you hadn't listened to me stupidly talk about Mike Williams instead of doing Alan Lazard. You know what I'm saying? Like we would have killed that showdown if we didn't.
I did have Lazard.
If you didn't listen to me and let me rant about stupid Mike Williams, or just see, that's what I'm saying. Just do this simple approach sometimes. Like don't overthink it with the Mike Williams. Like Lazard's going to play a lot. People hate Lazard. Put him in. That was the right mentality. And that's how I feel about Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson's going to play. He's cheap. People aren't going to use him enough because of shiny new toy, this, that, whatever stupid reason. They're not going to play him as much as they should. Put in Jeff Wilson. That's the simplest explanation of what to do tonight.
Are you then suggesting people use Wilson at captain?
I do have him at captain in a lineup. I right now have 3 lineups. I might do 4 lineups. I'm going to have him captain in 1 or 2.
I think that's fair. I always think sometimes the answer to that question isn't necessarily what you think of Jeff Wilson himself. It's what you think of, how balanced can the production be from the star players in the game? Is it is it likely that you're going to need both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? Is it likely that you're going to need Josh Allen and James Cook? Things of that nature. And if you want to be able to fit as many of those guys as possible, then the Jeff Wilson captain makes sense. Basically, I think more often than not, the decision of whether to go way down like that for captain comes down to, do you want to get an extra of the star players? Like if you have a lineup that has 3 of them and includes Jeff Wilson in the flex, chances are if you switch Jeff Wilson into the captain spot, you could get a 4th stud. So it just depends on what you think the studs can produce. But personally, I don't think I'm going to go to Jeff Wilson as long as Achane is in, because I don't know that I feel like his ceiling is that high. Because again, I do think Achane will have a decent role. I think Achane will have plenty of the like high value snaps where they know they want to throw a screen to the running back. They have this play design that they think can break off a 20-yard chunk. And I still think that's going to go to Achane instead of Jeff Wilson. So I think with Wilson, if you're going to make him your captain, you better feel like he's the one getting the goal line touches.
I mean, you make him your captain because of the goal line touch, or you make him your captain because you expect a high scoring game, and you're only using position players. You don't use Jeff Wilson as your captain and then start putting in kickers or a defense or whatever. You put in Jeff Wilson as your captain for the 3-3. Right now, like Jeff Wilson is in a balanced 3-3 lineup.
It's interesting you say that, because I would almost say the opposite. Think of the Niners game the other day. Debo didn't have a huge score. Ayuk and Kittle were kind of nowhere to be found. Garrett Wilson didn't go off. Breece Hall didn't go off. And so Mason as captain was, such a better play than if we had this like a big shootout where one of those receivers is well over 100 yards with 2 touchdowns or something like that. So I don't know. I think the number one thing
that way. You get what I'm saying? Like let's say Jeff Wilson gets like 15 points, you still have Tyreek Hill, you still have, Josh Allen and a receiver, and you have Tua, and let's just say Tua threw a touchdown or 2 to Tyreek or someone else. You're just able to get everything in that way.
Yeah. So my point is that in a high scoring game, the likelihood that one of those superstars separates, I just think is higher. Like
so you want that superstar out of the flex. I get it. I don't think about the 5,000 MME entry. I honestly don't even think about captain that much as consider which guys am I using.
That's a good point. That's an interesting point. Yeah, I like that.
I do also sometimes think about captain if it's a guy that I think is very under-owned and I love. That's when I'm more thinking about captain. Kind of maybe a Dalton Kincaid tonight.
That's a perfect segue, because we started the showdown discussion by saying we kind of want to be heavier on the Buffalo side. So which of these Buffalo guys do we actually really like? Obviously, if you're going to the Buffalo side, Josh Allen is in the lineup. Whether he's a captain or not maybe remains to be seen. But I think if there's one aspect that our ownership is too low on, it's Allen's captain ownership. I think our new formula for the showdown ownerships is not giving enough credit to the quarterbacks with rushing upside the way that Allen has, and that's particularly noteworthy for their captain ownership. So particularly in single entries, smaller contest sizes, I think Allen can get up there close to, but not quite at Tyreek Hill's level of captain ownership.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love James Cook just so goddamn much. And I was just reading Caleb's article, and it acts like he's just never really optimal captain. And it kind of got to me there a little bit. Maybe maybe I shouldn't do that. I have 3 lineups. I'll probably have a 4th. I don't have Kincaid as my captain yet. I just feel like I should. And because he's just the guy that could get the 2 touchdown passes,
Yeah, I wrote 10 under 10% today, and one of the lines that I wrote, and I could see you saying it as I wrote it, was week 2 is kind of all about taking advantage of people's overreactions to what happened in week 1. And the way that Kincaid was covered in that game by Arizona just made it so difficult for him to do anything. And Allen was able to take advantage by just finding the open guy because of all of the attention being paid to Kincaid. Could very easily be just a totally different game plan from Miami in this one. And then maybe Kincaid has, 10 receptions for 120 yards and a touchdown and is clearly the right captain to have. So I think that's a sharp route. I think you can pretty much take a chance on any of these Buffalo guys. But getting back to your point of just sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. If we already think that we have a contrarian build to the game where Buffalo just kind of takes over and wins this game almost comfortably, perhaps, it probably just makes sense to put Josh Allen in the captain spot and then load up on several of those skilled players, Kincaid and Cook and Samuel, or some combination, like maybe 3 of the big 5, if you will. I think is probably a really sharp way to build.
Yeah, I think just another way, it's just basically, you have to think of it as like you're spending like 45% of your salary on when we're on the Bills. Or sorry, like 45,000, like spending like 80% of your salary or more on the Bills. It's just a way, instead of thinking like 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, 4-2, 4-2, 5-1, think of it as like percentage of your salary.
Yeah.
Because these, outside of Jeff Wilson, these Miami guys are just super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I like is not rostering Tua and rostering the kicker, Jason Sanders. That's what I'm often doing in some of these like I'm not really doing the 5-1-4-2. I'm generally doing it more based on salary and like if I don't have Tua having their kicker. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the more the route I'm going because I just have so much extra salary with basically always having Jeff Wilson that I just don't find the need to really load up on defense, kicker, this, that. Like, I just don't need to do that.
Do you have any preferences between Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Curtis Samuel? You can even throw Matt Collins in there.
Not really. I mean, I'm not really using those guys. I have Curtis Samuel in one because I just think no one's going to use him. Mm-hmm. And he only played a quarter of the snaps week 1. They're clearly ramping up his workload.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to DeAndre Hopkins. Like, we didn't talk about him at all because he wasn't going to play that much. And they already said they're going to ramp him up. We don't know. Like, what happens to the public is they wait until he actually has that 60 to 70% snap share to start using him. Mm-hmm. It might be this week, and he might have that 2 plays, and then boom, he's at 3% ownership. So that's why I'm using him in one lineup. But Shakir, I think, kind of got like Shakir's never really ever done the type of thing where he blows out a game. Matt Collins, like, come on, he's probably not going to catch this week. Keon Coleman, like, he is probably going to be their wide receiver 1, so I can see using him. But I feel like, again, let's go with the simplest explanation. Dalton Kincaid played close to 90% of snaps. He is their best pass catcher, probably, going to the season. He had a bad game. He's probably going to have a good game. I'm smashing his overs on pick 6 often. I just like Dalton Kincaid. It's very simple. And with Jeff Wilson, I don't really need to get super cheap anyways.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. What I'll say about Curtis Samuel is I thought that he was going to be like a huge piece of this offense coming into the season, and I still think that he's going to get there. But he was hurt in the last couple of weeks of the preseason, and I think that got in their way of designing and scheming a lot of things specifically for him. And now it's a very short week that they're playing on. Here's a secret for everybody out there. Buffalo plays next Monday night against Jacksonville. So the chance of being really early on Curtis Samuel in an island game as a captain, something like that, will still be there for us a week from today. Actually, like a little more like 10 days from today. And I think that that's the route we want to go. Because I love his potential in this offense. I don't think that they were going to be able to introduce a lot more for him for this game based on what they had last week and just the fact that he's been banged up. So I think we really want to be early on Curtis Samuel. I think it's still.
Yeah, you're starting to convince me that this is like an Alan Lazard, Mike Williams moment we're having here. And maybe I'm going to listen to you this time.
And I
actually think Curtis Samuel is better in pick 6. His over under is 17.5 receiving yards. Maybe that's the way to go.
I also,
if he gets 25 yards.
I think if there's a rushing plus receiving, that would be even better. But
I'm not seeing it yet, but they seem to be adding stuff. Like I think they're kind of waiting to see if Achan's active. Yep, okay, they have Achan's up there now at 83.5 for rushing receiving. They don't have Curtis Samuel for that. They just have him for receiving, but I still think that's a good line. I like that over. And I think I'm going to take Curtis Samuel out of my one lineup as a Mike Williams, Alan Lazard situation. I'm probably going to roster him next week. So trying to.
If Samuel is still in the Mike Williams category, then which of the other Buffalo receivers is Alan Lazard? Is it Shakir? Is it Keon Coleman?
Alan Lazard is Dalton Kincaid. Okay.
I think he's probably a little bit too good to be Alan
Lazard. I know, but people hate him because he sucked last week. That's enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
And he's kind of expensive, so it's going to keep the ownership down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you there. So I think the other thing that I'll say is I think Keon Coleman is worth a shot because when you get into these types of games, I even saw a stat that Josh Allen, I think, is 5-0 on Thursday night, something like that. I think when you have a short week, you can't do the same type of game planning. And so sometimes it's just who can make the one-on-one plays a little bit better. And we know that Keon Coleman can do that. And I think that's also why Josh Allen has been so effective on Thursday nights because he's so good at just the unscripted part of offense. And so I like that route a little bit, particularly if you have Josh Allen as the captain. Part of that is you want him throwing some touchdowns. Keon Coleman certainly has a chance to catch a touchdown. And then if you're playing Allen as the captain, you probably want multiple guys. So you go to Kincaid for the PPR upside. You go to Coleman for the touchdown upside. I think that's a pretty strong start to any lineup.
Hey, if it works, it works. But yeah, I think Keon Coleman's definitely shown some signs of being their alpha, wide receiver one. So, he's probably the one to go to.
I've even tried.
I'll reluctantly probably put him in there instead of. Well, let's see, what is his salary at? Where's Keon Coleman at? 1,500. Pretty good.
Yeah, 58.
It's kind of a good amount.
I've even explored some lineups that try to get Allen with all three of Kincaid, Shakir, and Coleman. It does work. It's not spectacular, but it's not impossible. It's certainly not as difficult as I originally expected. Of course, Jeff Wilson is a part of that. I think the real magic trick would be finding a way to go Allen, Kincaid, Shakir, Coleman, and also get the Wilson fade. You clearly feel like you just don't even need to try and fade Wilson.
You don't need to fade Wilson if he's 50%. You fade Wilson if he's 80%.
My concern is that in small single. So, for example, one of the most important contests that I'm playing tonight is a $75, I think 67 person satellite for a $4,000 ticket. In that contest, I think that Wilson might be closer to the 80% number that you're saying you would fade him at than the 50% number we have him projected for in MME contests.
I don't know, man. I just don't think people are that excited to play Jeff Wilson. Not with Achan back. I think people are going to be like,
I think a big part of it is what news does or doesn't come out about Achan. If we hear that Achan is going to be on a snap count tonight, then I think that Wilson could get up there to the 70-80% number in those types of contests. If we hear that Achan is, ready for close to his usual role, then I'm with you, and I think Wilson will just be one of the more popular value plays, but not somebody that people click on immediately. So we'll just see on the
move. His usual role is not 80% snaps.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to tell.
I think the final point on Wilson is a lot of it is going to come down to the news that we get, and so just get yourself into the Discord if you can. We'll be talking through that all night long, leading up to lock. Anything else on Showdown before we turn to pick six?
No, I think that's it.
Cool. All right, so the big thing that we want to talk about with pick six, actually, let me run through some of these comments. Someone just dropped Cubs. Is that some player, or are we talking fantasy baseball all of a sudden? I'm not sure. Drop Chuba. There we go. Okay. I think I would rather have Chuba because we don't think that either of these injuries on Miami are going to be very long. Here's a bold take. Allen Knox plus Kincaid takes down the Millie. We didn't talk much about Dawson Knox, TwoGun. So before we go to pick 6, why don't we talk some Knox? Do you have any interest there as just a guy who can catch a touchdown?
No.
Fair enough. I think that if you're going to Knox, Josh Allen has to be your captain. If Allen's not your captain, there's no reason to play Knox because Knox is much more likely to be useful in a game where Allen throws for 3 or 4 touchdowns. So that's going to be my big take there. Let's go to pick 6. And the big thing I want to highlight, TwoGun, is your win this past week. A couple things to note here. The $51,700, that's pretty darn cool. But the real key here, and the thing that anybody watching can duplicate, is check out that payout way down at the bottom in real small print, 103.4x. The typical payout on a 6 pick is, I believe, 21x. But if you play pick 6 the right way, you can get these huge, huge payouts. So TwoGun, why don't you take us through a little bit, just your thought process that went into this pick? What was the timing of it? I'm assuming this came after the McCaffrey news.
So here's what happened. The payouts for pick 6 after McCaffrey got sat were high because everyone had the Debo over. Okay, Debo got 78 yards on the dot. So he lost, or 77. I forgot what it was. This thing missed by, a yard. And everyone was taking his overs. Now, everyone, before Debo's over-under was about 10 yards less.
Yeah.
So before CMC sat, everyone's still taking his over because everyone's always taking overs. But that over hits. So I had a one that was 5 for 5, but it had a CMC in there, so that got voided. So it went from a 6 to a 5. And that won, but it hit the minimum. Okay? I got one that went way over the minimum and one that went for the absolute minimum. They had to give me pick 6 credits. And that just goes to show you how much one player and everyone being on one player matters. Because nobody, once CMC sat, took the Debo under. And that's basically why the pick 6 payouts were good. Because everyone – because the pick out 6 payouts before – almost everyone had CMC in their pick 6 before he sat, right? Like, you're taking them one way or another. So there are very few live pick 6s in that that were around, and almost all of them had Debo over. So really, whenever everyone feels one way about a player, it's definitely better to go the other way. Yeah. And I don't really know if that's happening tonight. I think it's, in general, my pick 6s are generally geared towards the under for tonight's game because everyone loves the over and just over this, over that. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as how much everyone was over on Debo, but in general, I think being on the under is the way to go.
Yeah.
In a smart way, not like just clicking under. There's ways to go about it that are a little more high probability.
And to that point, I think you correlated really well here. So you have the Debo under, but you also have Ayuk under, Purdy under, Kittle under. So like one of the ways that Debo would have gone under, I think for a lot of people would have said is, oh, well, maybe it's just an Ayuk game or a Kittle game. But you said, okay, the entire offense is just centered around Mason. And you had Mason's over. Mason had this huge, huge game on the ground. Because he did so well on the ground, it also kept the ball away from New York. And so Garrett Wilson, after that first quarter, just kind of totally disappeared. The Jets' offense disappeared. So this entire 6-pick play told a very specific story. And that specific story is exactly how the game played out. And so to your point, it's like you weren't just correlating, but you were correlating in a way that was leveraging what so many of the people playing pick 6 thought was going to happen. And so that's why you end up with a payout 5 times as high as what is expected.
Yeah, essentially. It's generally you want to like pick 6 when it's these one games. It's all about correlating, and the idea is correlate the game script that people don't really expect.
Yeah,
and that's so how you get
with that. Why don't we talk some pick 6 for tonight? What do you think people are expecting to happen in tonight's game, and what picks are they therefore selecting to start us off with?
It's weird. I figured everyone's going to hit the Tyreek Hill over, but it keeps just going down, which is funny. So I'm kind of happy I locked in some other stuff that's over or under on him, that is. I feel like people are going to generally want to click over Josh Allen passing yards or over Tua passing yards, and just in general, some over all these receivers. I'm not really sure otherwise what people are going to love. Like, there's just not that one love player. And if it's that one love player, you think it would be Tyreek Hill, but maybe his number is just so high that people aren't clicking over on it. I can see Achan's over 30. I'm not sure if I'm necessarily going to take the under on it, though. 30 and a half receiving yards. I mean, I could just see this being game kind of a boring-ass Jeff Wilson run game, as I made that clear.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even Devin, even Achan run game. Another one I like is actually Josh Allen under rushing yards. I think people just love seeing Josh Allen run.
Yeah.
But our tool says that that's just a good one to take. Is like he's projected for about 28 yards. So, but I think let's talk more about like correlating our pick.
Well, let me start here because I think that a lot of people are going to look at this trio of Bills: Coleman, Kincaid, Shakir. They're going to look at last week's game and they're going to say, why is Shakir not the highest of the three? And they're going to start with this pick right there. Khalil Shakir more than 40 and a half receiving yards. So I want to start by going less there. And then we talked earlier about thinking that Curtis Samuel 17 and a half is a good one. Like, to me, there's really strong correlation here between a less than on Shakir and a more than on Curtis Samuel. What do you think of that start?
I have that actually in one of them literally already. I have Khalil Shakir under in two of them. One of them actually both of them I have Curtis Samuel over. You could also throw in Dalton Kincaid over or Keon Coleman over as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to take a position on Josh Allen's receiving yards or passing yards by the way. I really like this, just that Josh Allen throws an interception because he throws an interception like 80% of games.
I like that. Let's see. Interceptions thrown. So yeah, we could go more on Allen there.
I mean, that's the closest to like a pure like, was it, like it's a 50-50 take, but it's interceptions aren't really correlated with much, but that's just a pure like you're probably gonna be right on it. So
I think one of the things they do correlate with is just overall play volume. So if Allen's throwing a pick or two like that makes it a lot more likely that Miami ends up running 10 more plays in the game than Buffalo, for example. And so one of the things that you could do is then say, all right, because I think that Allen's going to throw a pick and give the ball right back to Miami at some point in this game, now I want to go higher on Achan's rushing yards or Waddle's receptions, something along those lines. So I don't feel spectacular about the rushing yards in Achan. I think I'm a little bit more likely to go to receiving yards on one of these guys or even just probably receptions instead. Anything standing out to you as just a really good individual pick that would also correlate well?
Not with interceptions. I mean, I feel like James Cook. I don't know. I just like James Cook too much. I like his over on both his yards, 17 and a half for receiving, and then or 16 and a half for rushing.
Mm-hmm.
That has nothing to do with interceptions, though, is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I would almost say both of those are inversely correlated because whether it's handing off to James Cook or throwing short to James Cook, those are the type of plays that are going to make it a little bit less likely that Allen does throw.
Here's another thing I like that's correlated is Tua completions because whenever a player throws a lot, he threw for 38 passes last week. That's a lot. Everyone just expects, like, people think of targets and yards. They don't really think of like, oh wow, he threw for 50 times. Like that's probably not going to happen yet. And kind of the same thing last week. He threw his is a 33 and a half passing attempts. I'm not taking a position there, but I can take a position at 22 and a half completions, and then go on the under on that, and then under on some of these other guys, because I don't think people are really hammering completions and receptions so much, but it's just if they're going to do it, they're going to do it the wrong way. You feel me?
Yeah, I agree. Allen, by the way, 18 of 23 in the first game. Now there were a couple weird game script things there that led to a pretty big, fewer plays than expected. Only 60 for Arizona, 58 for Buffalo. A
Actually,
lot of that was.
think about it. Josh Allen interceptions thrown might be inversely correlated with Tua's completions because the idea is Allen throws a pick six or whatever it is, and like Miami just runs the ball. Like if anything, it's cool, but I just don't like the rushing yards on Achane. I mean, you can maybe do that. But.
Yeah, I feel like there's one thing that I didn't have the time yet this week to actually go check, but my inclination was to say that in week 1 we saw a lower average depth of target than usual, and we saw a lot more just kind of like short passes, whether it's screens or short passes against zones that are meant to keep the ball in front of them. Particularly, we saw that on Sunday night. Like, remember that Rams offense was just let's throw the ball quickly and almost treat the short passing game as an extension of the running game. If we see that sort of thing, that's the type of script where you could very easily get more on completions for quarterbacks, and you would then be able to very confidently predict which receivers or tight ends or running backs would be the beneficiary there, and also go more on reception. So that's one thing that I'm kind of exploring, but both of these guys at 22.5 is pretty high. So again, Allen had 18 completions in week 1. Tua only had 23. So it's tough. I think they're pretty well priced at these numbers.
Yeah, but it's just the correlation between completions and receptions is perfect. Like it's just perfect. So it's just something that's great to stack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people just aren't going to take unders on that.
Mm-hmm.
They just aren't. So it's the perfect stat. Like sometimes it's okay to take stuff that's okay. Like it's the Josh Allen interceptions. Like I said, very likely to win, but terrible at. No one's taking the under on that. And you can't really stack it. So it's good for just like an add one. Mm-hmm. Now, 2 completions and receptions, that is perfect for correlating, perfect for ownership. So it's kind of a little mix and match thing. And it's always better to have more picks because that's what the dumb money's in the pick 6. No one wants to grind out pick 3s, pick 4s. You know, the dead money is all on pick 6, most likely. Maybe some people do pick 5, pick 4, but my bet is the dead money is in pick 6.
Do you have any favorite pairings on the lower completions, lower receptions? By the way, Allen just fell to 21.5 completions from 22.5.
It's funny because I don't really wasn't using Allen. I mainly been using Tua for that. Although honestly, like Allen's probably more likely to happen. Like he's just not going to throw the ball as much.
Yeah, where he runs the ball a lot. So I think that's actually you can't do 2 guys in the same one. But like I think Allen lower on completions with one of the Buffalo receivers, maybe Shakir lower on completions or lower on receptions, and then a higher on James Cook's rushing yards. I think that correlates extremely well. I don't necessarily have a favorite among the Buffalo guys though, which to take the less receptions for.
No, I don't. Just Buffalo got less receptions. Just Shakir, I would say. I don't really like any of the other ones. But for the Dolphins, they're only letting you do it on Tyreek, Waddle, and Johnny. And I honestly prefer just to use 2 of them instead of hitting all 3 because it's just kind of you're asking a little bit much there.
Yeah. Do you have a preference between the 3?
I probably would do under. I probably Tyreek. I mean, just because they're giving you 6.5. And like when you get those long bombs, like that's just only one catch.
Yeah, I think that I lean to Waddle there.
I mean, I do lean towards. I don't know. I'm just not a Waddle guy. Like in best ball, like I really have almost no Waddle. I just feel like he just doesn't do anything when Tyreek is playing. Actually, yeah. Just looking at his game log of last year for Tyreek Hill, it's like he's going to hit that 7 slightly more than half the time. But how often does Waddle do it when Tyreek is playing, you know?
Mm-hmm. One of the things we nailed in pick six last time, in our pick six discussion, that is, were all the field goal attempts from Detroit. So any kicking point thoughts here in this game? Basically, like if for anyone who wasn't tuned in that time, what we said was there's a good chance against this Rams defense that Detroit will be able to move the ball pretty well, but then not be able to actually get the ball into the end zone. Actually, sorry, I think I confused myself. I think we were talking about the San Francisco game, that they'd be able to move the ball well, but they wouldn't be able to get it into the end zone against that great Jets defense. So anything like that kind of ring a bell here for this game where you think one of these teams is going to be able to move the ball well, but not necessarily punch it in the end zone each time?
I mean, I think that's definitely going to happen to both these teams in this game. I don't know. Maybe I lift kickers too much. I never found myself doing the under on the kicker. I always do the overs on the kickers, and I like to pair it with under on passing touchdowns. I mean, that was perfect last week, or on Monday with Purdy. Like the kicker was the MVP, and Purdy didn't throw a touchdown, even though they put up 37 points or however much it was. So yeah, under on Tua touchdowns and over on Jason Sanders kicking points.
Yeah,
it's something I kind of like pairing.
Yep, I like that quite a bit. So we can go ahead and toss that in here. I would also say it's weird though, because like one thing I would love to be able to do is say less than on Josh Allen's passing touchdowns and more on his rushing touchdowns, but obviously you can't do that. But like that's probably the strongest correlation of all. If you were able to get that somewhere, maybe on sports books, you might be able to do something like that in same game parlays, which would certainly be worthwhile if they're not accounting correctly for that correlation.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta always remember with these same game parlays that the sports books, they're just not going to let you win. Like they're not going to give you like correlations and not punish you for it. So, and again, that's what I like about pick six is that you are allowed to win at pick six because you're not playing against the sports book, you're playing against other people. And say what?
I think that my favorite like correlated just bucket of picks is going back to that kind of original thought from you where we're going with completions and receptions less thans, and we're going to Buffalo, so we're going to go more on James Cook 60.5 rushing yards. Less than I think it's probably Shakir, but man, I almost think it's actually Keon Coleman that we should be less than on, just because his average depth of target is going to be larger. So I think that I would prefer
both.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is I think that Coleman is more likely to go less than 3.5, but I think Shakir is the more likely guy that people are going to be picking overs on. So whether that's here in receptions or receiving yards, I think so many people are going to be banking on Shakir that we want to just go with less than on Shakir. You were already with that, so I think you're
you could also, if you're messing around with receptions, like do unders on those two and take over on Kincaid.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% that works. So yeah, like this right here would be a pretty
correlation
nice
with these things is very good.
Yep.
And that's why you want a few things that are really heavily correlated when you're doing six, because it's just so hard to get six. Like I talk about how likely Josh Allen is to throw an interception. Maybe it's 80% chance. Like I'm making that number up, but obviously that's a very good one to take. It's hard to get 80% things right. Like what is 0.8 to the 6th power? Like
low.
That's 1 in 4. That's still actually really good. But like 0.6 to the 6th power is 0.04%.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously if things were 50, if you're betting straight up and you're getting 60% like a sportsbook, just straight up bets, you are killing it. You are right. If you're right 60% of the time, you're going to get banned and limited within like a week. Okay. But getting 6 things independently right at 60% chance is a 4% chance. That means you're going to win 1 out of every 25 times. That's not that good.
Right.
So the way that you just got to keep stuff you got to keep good, nicely correlated. That's really the key. Correlation and ownership. That's what this game is about.
Yeah, correlation and payout for sure. And it's if we could boil pick six down into just one sentence, it's figure out what everyone else is trying to do and then correlate against that so that you're also leveraging the field. And that's how you get the 100x payouts that TwoGun nailed on Monday.
Yeah, and like it was a weird week because it was all about Debo. It was all about Debo. Debo was hit the over on the 5 for 5s on all early stuff, so payouts were low. But if it was late, if the guys came in late, they didn't have a Debo. Like they lost on their Debo, so I got paid well. And you got to understand how badly I got killed in week 1, Alex. Like I lost even after that pick 6 win. Like I won a little bit of pick 6 overall. I lost Thursday. Can you remember how much I hated Worthy? Whoops. I probably lost more money than most of you guys make in a year. You have your jobs. So it's kind of nice, like thinking like, hey, I sucked so bad in week 1 at everything. Like, remember what we talked about that, in the Chiefs game, and I talked about low scoring and no Worthy? Like, wrong. Remember how much I talked about Jalen Polk? Wrong. I talked about fading Tyreek Hill? Wrong. But I still want to pick 6. So that's the nice thing is it's a different game. It's unique. And most people just don't know how to play it. They don't understand they're playing against other people. They think they're just making random choices up and down, and they don't understand it's about correlation and, payouts. So
yeah, I think the average pick 6 player is going to a site and trying to find like the best props available. And they don't realize that if you're just trying to find the best prop and then applying that to pick 6, you're playing the game incorrectly. And so that's what we're trying to hear. That's what we're here to try and help everybody do, is not just find the picks that they think are most likely to win, but also learn about the game that you're actually playing.
And that's just something no one understands yet, Alex, and they're not going to understand it for a year or two. This is the year to win at pick 6, maybe even next year. But like, definitely, the rate is high in this game. It's 20%, although they give you so many promos that the effective gets lower. Like, I don't know about you. I have this thing that do $10,000 of entries, get $1,000 of credits. Now, I don't think most people are doing $10,000 of entries, so I'm feeling that's a TwoGun special. But they will do that for other people where it's more like in line with how much they play, like $500 and $50 or whatever like that. So I don't know. I really think that no one, and I just don't know how many of the sharps are even playing this yet, besides like me, like the high volume sharps.
Yeah, I think you're right, and we had this conversation a little bit last week, but again, like there were people that I would very much consider sharps in DFS, like just traditional DraftKings play, that have been talking about pick 6 on Twitter and have very clearly been talking about it in what you and I believe to be an incorrect way. That they're looking for just the picks that have the highest percent chance of hitting correctly, without any consideration to what being on that pick will do to their payout. So, as you said, the time is now to get in and actually take advantage of this game.
I mean, I haven't looked at the drill down of my contest and who's in it and what to see the other guys I know that I respect as NFL sharps. I remember playing for baseball just to learn the game because remember I don't know shit about baseball. Like I don't know any. I mean, I don't even know who like the pitchers like that. I didn't know that Pirates guy was he's really good or something like that, with a mustache. Like I don't know anything about. I don't know anything. But I remember looking at, they did this one promo for a week of get, win a certain amount of points every time you get a right thing and you get some pick 6 credits. And I didn't notice any players, high volume DFS players that do all the sports. There's a few guys I know, I only really do NFL, but there's some of the guys that are big at NFL that do other sports too. And I haven't seen them playing.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's do this. On every Monday and Thursday now, this show is going to end with a hot take for the showdown itself. So do you have one, or do you want me to start it off? Because I've got one ready to rip if you
got to go.
If you want a moment to think about yours. My hot take for tonight's game is that Keon Coleman scores a touchdown. Not a super hot take, but absolutely would mean that he is likely to be optimal tonight at just $5,800 on Showdown. So Keon Coleman touchdown is my hot take.
My hot take is Jason Sanders outscores Tua.
I love that. I love that so much. It was not that far off
everyone cry.
week one, by the way.
What?
It was not that far off from happening in week one. It was 10
well, it happened, with Purdy and, in the 49ers game. So,
so if you look at Tua's final line, he had 21.6 fantasy points, but think about how many of those came because there was an 80-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill, right? So you have 4 for the touchdown. You have an additional 3 for getting him to the 300-yard bonus. And then you have a little bit more than 3 more on the yardage points. So without that touchdown to Tyreek Hill, they're only like a 1.5 apart or something based on my mental math in this moment. But yeah, so I think it's a hot take that absolutely has a chance to happen, especially if Sanders ends up kicking 1 or 2 more field goals than he had last game. So by the way, I think those 2 hot takes work pretty well together if you're out there trying to hand build some lineups for tonight's showdown. So with that,
one of the keyest builds is always take the kicker instead of the quarterback.
Yep.
The only time you do that is if it's a 5-1 and you're just expecting like 40-5, and that's just not this game. Or 40-3, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it's weird too because in that Niners game, it's like one of the very few times we've seen that play out in such a way where you still wanted to be on the skill guys of the team that kicked all the field goals, just because.
Right, skill guys is not, but Purdy was terrible.
Yeah,
Purdy didn't do squat because he didn't get any touchdowns.
Yep. All right. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. We will be back Sunday morning behind the paywall. TwoGun will be here on a free show, 9:30, and then we will be together talking the entire DFS slate for DraftKings at 10 o'clock Eastern for all the subscribers. Every Monday, every Thursday, you can find us here for free at 5:30 Eastern time. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.